countries, and to those whose questions we did not reach. But that now ends portfolio questions, and we turn to the next item of business, which is a debate on motion number S4M 06746 in the name of Alex Neil on ensuring access to high-quality, sustainable services for people living with chronic pain. Could I give a few seconds for members to change seats, but in the meantime invite those members who wish to speak in this debate to press the request to speak buttons now, please. Thank you very much. Can I call on Alex Neil to speak to and move the motion? 14 minutes, please, Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you very much indeed, Presiding Officer. I have great pleasure in moving the motion on chronic pain in my name. In doing so, I want to pay tribute to the campaigners on this subject, some of whom are in the gallery today, because they have campaigned long and hard on this particular issue, and I hope with what I have to say today will cheer them up in terms of the substantial progress I believe we are now going to make in relation to chronic pain. I particularly want to mention Jackie Ford, Susan Archibald, who led the petition to the Public Petitions Committee, and to Dorothy Grace Elder, all of whom have campaigned very vigorously indeed on behalf of the 800,000 or so people in Scotland who suffer from chronic pain. I think I'm right in saying that the only other debate we have had on chronic pain since the Parliament was established in 1999 is one that was moved as a members' debate by Dorothy Grace Elder when we were up the road in the other place. And I remember the galleries were absolutely full to the gunwales for that debate, and I'm delighted that we're having another debate today, not because we're just talking about it, but because we're acting in a number of ways to address the issue. As I said, Presiding Officer, we estimate there are about 800,000 people in Scotland who do suffer from chronic pain, and about a quarter of them suffer from possibly lifelong chronic pain syndromes. And amongst those, there are 70,000 children who suffer from chronic pain, which is a debilitating illness by any standard. So what I want to do today is to spell out the progress that has been made and, more importantly, look to the future in terms of our plans on how we take matters forward. Can I say, obviously, one of the things that we've already done early on, about 5 or 6 years ago, was to recognise chronic pain as an illness in its own right that required a dedicated solution, dedicated caring, dedicated services, and the budgets to go with it. So let me start, first of all, by making it absolutely clear in relation to residential facilities. As we know at the moment, on average every year, about 20 people have to go down to Bath to receive the specialist treatment that is available down there for the most severe sufferers of chronic pain. We intend to end that situation where people have to travel to Bath and ensure that those facilities are available here in Scotland. Now, we will consult because there are different ways to deliver this service. One way is to provide one centre for the entire country. Another way is to have a mobile service. A third alternative is to have a range of services in different parts of the country. But as we are going to do with all these services, we are going to consult with the patients and the other stakeholders before we make a final decision on which model is most appropriate. But let me give this guarantee that once we take that decision and once those facilities are in place, there should be no need for anyone to travel to Bath to get the support and services that they need.
Jackson Carlo.
Can I potentially short-circuit the Cabinet Secretary's consultation by saying that I think we would welcome all three?
Cabinet Secretary.
You would, if you get your government to reverse their cuts. I might be able to afford all three. Can I say also, because there are at least 3 possible scenarios, I can't accept a Labour amendment which would commit us to only one scenario of one centre, but I'm absolutely sure, and I hope Jackie Baillie will confirm, that we're all in the same place in this debate about wanting to end up in the same place in terms of the quality and range of services available. But I think it would be rather foolish of me to accept an amendment that commits us only to one centre when we're going to consult on whether there is a better alternative model.
Aware that chronic pain is often unseen and as such often goes unrecognised. In contact with my own constituents, I'm told their experience and access to support services is limited and patchy. Can you tell me how my constituents might go about contributing to the consultation process you're obviously about to begin?
Cabinet Secretary.
Absolutely. We'll be publishing a document fairly soon on the pros and cons of each model, and we will then go out to consultation, and everybody will be free to input into that consultation. And then, once we have had the consultation and evaluated the findings from the consultation, we will then reach a decision. So everybody in Scotland, and I would encourage as many people as possible to participate and tell us what their preference would be, because I want this to be as much as possible driven by the needs of the people who require these services as far as we possibly can. And we will very clearly take into account the views of patients and other stakeholders before we make any final decisions. But I am determined that we will make a decision on which model round about September of this year. I don't want this to drag on. We will have a period of consultation, we'll listen to what people are saying, but then we will make a decision and deliver on the promise to have an alternative to Bath in Scotland as soon as possible.
Margot MacDonald.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for giving way, particularly when he's in full flow. And I welcomed the remark there about other stakeholders, because folk who have chronic pain know they've got chronic pain. A lot of the doctors treating them don't know what like it is and don't know how to treat it. So can I suggest that, as well as patients learning to cope with pain, some medical staff would do a course of instruction as well?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I do think that's a very fair point that Margot MacDonald makes, and one of our clear objectives is to raise awareness amongst the medical profession about not just chronic pain, but what can and should be done to help people who suffer from chronic pain. The second major point I want to make is this, that we have already substantially reduced waiting times from over 80 weeks to just over 60 weeks for psychological services, and we will continue a drive to significantly reduce waiting times, particularly for those services which are so crucial to the sufferers of chronic pain in the immediate period ahead. I do not believe it is right that people have to wait that length of time to go for our essential services, which they need fairly urgently. The third point I want to make is this, and looking at the petition submitted by Susan Archibald and the many people who supported that petition, one of the key points that was made is that in delivering the services for sufferers of chronic pain, we shouldn't just think in terms of a medical health model, but the social model as well. And let me say that we are very committed to that principle. And indeed, the bill published today for the integration of adult health and social care should help us to deliver an integrated health and social care service delivery for sufferers of chronic pain. And if there ever was an example of where the integration of services is important, it's in relation to dealing with the chronic pain issue. Now, I want to set out some of the work that's already going on and the approaches being taken, but in saying that, I do recognise that there is still a wide variation within Scotland in terms of access to certain services. And one of our key policy objectives is to make sure there is no postal code delivery of services. We want a consistent delivery of high-quality services in both primary and acute sectors for the sufferers of chronic pain. But clearly a tiered approach is required, because actually most of the service will not be in the acute sector. Most of the service delivery inevitably will be in the primary sector. Now, we have long advocated the role of the managed clinical networks and the role that they can have in coordinating a multidisciplinary approach to service provision. We also need to ensure that those clinical networks give a strong voice to patients in how to shape local service delivery. And as I will say in a minute, we will place an obligation on the territorial health boards to provide a minimum level of services, of good quality services, but in doing so, we will require them to discuss the shape of the local services with local populations and with stakeholder groups representing the sufferers of chronic pain. There are some areas that are making more progress and have made more progress than others. NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, the managed clinical network has been operating for 5 years and has demonstrated some real improvements, including the development of a pain management programme, setting standards for chronic pain services, developing primary care guidelines, and more recently the setting up of specialist nurse clinics to provide care more locally for patients. So obviously that's a very good example of the kind of ambition that we have in delivering this service. We actually recently have also, and if you look at the figures published yesterday on workforce development across the board, seen an increase in appropriate skills and occupations in the health service in servicing sufferers of chronic pain and others. For example, there has been a 5% increase in the number of clinical and other applied psychologists working in the health service compared to last year. The mental health strategy for Scotland for the next 3 years also makes a commitment to continue our work to deliver faster access to psychological therapies. And the programme to deliver this work is delivered locally but supported nationally and includes support for local service redesign aimed at achieving service improvement within existing resources. And let me say, obviously, the territorial boards are receiving a real-time increase in budget this year and next. So the resources should be in place to allow them, all of them, to deliver the quality of services that we are demanding. We are supporting the development of MCN service improvement groups with pump priming of up to 50k per year for each group over 2 years, the purpose of which is to put together a local plan for improvement in their area. And so far, the following health boards have participated in that programme: Ayrshire and Arden, of Fleece and Galloway, Forth Valley, Lanarkshire, Lothian and Tayside, who between them cover 73% of the population. Our aim is to have 100% coverage of the population in this programme to prepare and make sure the local service delivery plans are in place from next year at the very latest. The main priority of these groups is to focus on and accelerate the implementation of the Scottish Service Model for chronic pain. In particular, the development of these groups will look to improve links with primary care, paediatric services and the voluntary sector, and patient participation will be an essential feature of their work. Some of this work is obviously in its early stages. For example, in NHS Ayrshire and Arden, their work to improve chronic pain services has been closely aligned with musculoskeletal services redesign, and that allows early identification, rapid triage and assessment with timely onward referral into appropriate services, including chronic pain management, self-management support and the working health service. In NH5 and Borders, they are currently working on draft proposals for their groups. NHS5 has already a fully integrated chronic pain management service, Rivers, which has been established for over 3 years and fulfils a number of aspects of the MCN approach. And clearly, we will be working with that and other groups to take these programmes forward to ensure entire coverage through Scotland. Presiding Officer, I have told boards to accelerate progress and to set an expectation that improvement plans will be in place for every board by the end of this month. In addition, I have advised chairs of boards that I will be calling on them to provide me with an update of progress when I meet them in June. I will be looking to them to identify and seek solutions to any barriers in delivery. I have commissioned work to consider how to most efficiently include chronic pain in the local delivery plans for each board from 2014 onwards, and to ensure there are clear reporting mechanisms in place to monitor progress through the annual NHS board review process. There are many other initiatives that I could mention, but no doubt others will do so, and my colleague, the Minister for Public Health, Michael Matheson, will cover a number of the ones that I haven't been able to reach. But I just want to spell out, on behalf of Michael Matheson and myself and the Scottish Government, our total commitment to improving the chronic pain service throughout Scotland and making sure we have the indigenous services here in Scotland that our patients need to deal with this very debilitating illness. Thank you.
Cabinet Secretary, could you move your motion, please?
I thought I moved it to the beginning.
All
Sorry.
right, thank you very much. Now calling Jackie Bailey to speak to and move Amendment S4M06746.1. 10 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and I too welcome the opportunity to participate in this debate, not just on behalf of my party, but also as one of the 3 co-conveners of the cross-party group on chronic pain, together with Jackson Carlaw and John Wilson. And can I start by echoing the Cabinet Secretary's comments, welcoming the many people from across Scotland who are part of the cross-party group that are in this gallery this afternoon. Some of you may indeed spot Dorothy Grace Elder, a former parliamentary colleague. She championed the cause of chronic pain in the very first Parliament that led to the formation of the cross-party group. So this campaign is not new. In fact, some of us think it's been rather a long haul, and many of the campaigners who have been seeking change for more than a decade are impatient to see a difference on the ground. We have had numerous very helpful reports over the years, commissioned by different governments. Professor McEwen's report, followed by the GRIPS report, which have all highlighted the gaps in provision. But the frustration has indeed been the lack of action. We do have a postcode lottery of care currently, so where you receive a service, or whether you receive a service, actually depends on where you live, and much of what the Cabinet Secretary has said is therefore very welcome. But let me start with a residential pain centre in Scotland. Scottish Labour was the only party, I believe, to pledge in our manifesto that we would create a residential service in Scotland and end the ordeal of any pain patient from Scotland being sent as far away as Bath in Somerset. Now, we often refer... Indeed so. Cabinet Secretary.
The member accept that I'm delivering on her manifesto commitment.
Well, could I encourage him to read the rest of the manifesto, and if he delivered on the rest of our manifesto commitments, I might have more praise for him in future. But there you go. He and I share this objective because, we often think about people travelling 800 miles to 1,000 miles, return journeys to get a service. The distances can in fact be longer. We understand one sufferer was sent from Shetland, a marathon return journey of over 1,600 miles. And these patients, although they may be small in number, they're subjected to such gruelling travel are actually those who perhaps are at the worst, most acute end of suffering. So, of course, I welcome a promise from the Cabinet Secretary to create a Scottish inpatient service. One note of caution, though, specialist provision, by its very nature being specialist, cannot be scattered across Scotland, especially when we already acknowledge there are gaps in the most basic services. And can I say, unlike the lack of action on this previously, I know that the Cabinet Secretary is determined to see that happen, and I applaud him for that determination, but it is in stark contrast to what went before. Now, Scottish taxpayers have paid over £1.1 million in the last few years to send just 119 patients on these journeys instead of creating that Scottish inpatient service for those needing it. Wales has long had its own inpatient centre at Powys, and I commend that model to the Cabinet Secretary. Our amendment isn't about bricks and mortar, but it is about recreating specialist provision in Scotland, and that, I fear, because of its nature, needs to be centralised. Members may be aware that Susan Archibald lodged a petition already talked about with the Parliament on behalf of the cross-party group. She asked for residential services in Scotland, not Bath. She asked for improved and consistent access to pain services for patients across Scotland. And Susan's evidence to the Petitions Committee as a severe pain sufferer was both courageous and profoundly affecting, and I don't think anybody remained unmoved by her story. And I'm extremely proud of the campaigning by the cross-party group's volunteers over the years, because they have persevered, despite obstacles, to keep their focus on improving services. And let me turn to local services. The Scottish service model for chronic pain, to which the Health Secretary referred, was outlined by the late Dr Peter Mackenzie, the first lead clinician in chronic pain, in 2009. But so far, only 6 out of the 14 health boards have the model in place. Now, I accept more are to be in the pipeline, but how long do patients have to wait? And I share the Cabinet Secretary's desire to accelerate the rate of change. We are now hearing from the Scottish Government that they will hold health boards accountable for implementing the model, and that is welcome. But real improvement can't be implemented without funding, and we do know that 10 out of the 14 health boards don't actually record a budget for chronic pain treatment. Now, that's not me saying this. It's the campaigners that the Cabinet Secretary rightly praised just a few moments ago. The previous Health Secretary declined to give any direct funding to stimulate the provision of chronic pain services beyond initial funding of some £50,000 for a managed clinical network in Glasgow. For the past few years, it appeared that the Scottish Government has put chronic pain, affecting some 780,000 people in Scotland, in the slow lane. Now, at least, we've got a Health Secretary prepared to inject some momentum, in complete contrast to his predecessor. Now, accelerating the pace of change is essential if we're to see a difference on the ground. But we also need transparency. Information on the true state of chronic pain services has not always been evident, and I doubt if even the Cabinet Secretary himself has been told of some of the issues arising. Was he told, for example, that Lanarkshire, which is one of Scotland's worst rates of chronic pain, has only 2 part-time consultants working with pain, 1 whole-time equivalent in a population of 562,000, with an estimated 26% of the population suffering from chronic pain. Now, we know that Lanarkshire has had some small seed money for an improvement group, but the need is clearly far greater than that. So we've got consultants who are part-time, because they're also, in the main, anaesthetists. This also applies to multidisciplinary teams, the nurses, the physios, the clinical psychologists, and in many areas, disciplines like occupational therapy and physiotherapy just not represented. I know money is tight, but the Cabinet Secretary needs to be aware that if you just take NHS Lanarkshire, over 50 patients were suddenly removed from their waiting lists last year without apparently knowledge of the doctors or the staff, and sent to a private hospital for pain treatment, but not seen by a pain specialist. Now, that making of waiting lists look better isn't confined to just a few areas. That money, potentially, though, would have been better spent in securing more time for chronic pain treatment within the NHS. I give way to Margaret
MacDonald.
I thank the member for giving way. Is there a standard agreed amongst the health boards as to the severity of chronic pain? Is it staged and so on? How do they judge what the actual requirement for clinical services is?
Jackie Bailey.
There will indeed be standards, and they will have a system that they themselves operate, but these are matters for clinical judgment rather than the judgment of indeed politicians or bureaucrats, and they will themselves have protocols that actually refer people to the right level of pain treatment. I'm sure the Cabinet Secretary may well be more knowledgeable than me on this, and he might well place something in spice to advise us of that. I'm getting the nod, so there is agreement on that. But can I take you from Lanarkshire to Greater Glasgow and Clyde? Because they have had plans in place for years. Staff have worked incredibly hard to provide a service, and I know that it is widely appreciated by patients. But just last year, they reported that appointments for patients to see a pain psychologist to help them cope were between 72 and 82 weeks. Now, just imagine somebody in severe pain being informed in winter that their next appointment would not happen in the current year, would not happen in all of the next year, they'd be seen the following year. That just really is quite shocking. And whilst I absolutely accept the Cabinet Secretary is saying that, at this point in time, people are waiting, I think it was 60 weeks, you said? That's still well over a year. So I hope the Cabinet Secretary agrees that there is a need to be transparent about the scale of the challenge faced so we can accurately measure progress. And in any discussion about transparency, I have to turn to the update report produced by Healthcare Improvement Scotland. It was widely attacked for whitewashing the bad news about chronic pain. The report omitted staff numbers, whole-time equivalent numbers, patient numbers, the fact that only 4 out of 14 health boards had a budget for chronic pain treatment. But all of these facts had actually been sent by health boards to Healthcare Improvement Scotland, so one can only presume that they'd chosen to leave them out of the picture so that the picture would look better. We are told by HIS that there was an average 11 weeks waiting time for a first appointment at a pain clinic. The report didn't mention that 6 boards hadn't supplied waiting times, so a Scottish average was just not possible. A Freedom of Information request I made to health boards last year showed that something like 3,000 pain patients were on waiting lists, 1,866 waiting for first appointments, 1,082 in the queue for second appointments. And the wait between first and second appointments was frankly appalling in some areas. And that despite the hard work and innovation of the staff to try and make services stretch. We hear much about the need to transfer more chronic pain services into primary care, and many of us agree with that because it brings the services much closer to patients and allows them to increasingly self-manage their condition. But we need to be wary, and the BMA said primary care already deals with the great majority of chronic pain cases. However, there needs to be an option to refer to a specialist pain service for particularly difficult cases, and any further transfer of work would have to be evidence-based and be accompanied by appropriate resources. Finally, Presiding Officer, there is a need to involve those with chronic pain in the design of services. I know the Cabinet Secretary has already added 1 patient to the Chronic Pain Steering Group, and that is welcome. And he's outlined a process of more systematic engagement, and I support the Cabinet Secretary's new approach to this, because, you know, if we get this right, we are much more likely to design services that actually deliver for people. And, Presiding Officer, that surely is an objective we all share across the Parliament.
And I must ask you to move your amendment, please.
Move the amendment in my name.
And now Colin Jackson-Carlow, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I too welcome the many volunteers here? I'm not going to add to the flattery because they've had 10 years of that and have found it didn't butter many parsnips. So I think they will have wholeheartedly welcomed the contribution from the Cabinet Secretary this afternoon. As a co-convener of the cross-party group on chronic pain and on the Petitions Committee, hearing the Susan Archibald petition, can I say, what is chronic pain? I think it was the question Margot MacDonald asked. She knew, but I think very legitimately asked, how do you define the severity of it if you're not yourself a sufferer of it? Some might have thought a definition of chronic pain was you, Deputy Presiding Officer, saying we had a 14-minute contribution from the Cabinet Secretary ahead of us. For some of us in the cross-party group, I have to say, we have found new ways to define chronic pain on the cross-party group, and I'm sure some of those present will recognise that. It is sterilely described as being continuous long-term pain lasting more than 12 weeks or pain persisting after the time that healing would have been expected to occur after trauma or injury. Now, I can't pretend to know what chronic pain is over 12 weeks. I'm a chronic migraine sufferer and have been all my life. That lasts 72 hours. I can only describe what it's like for me. Imagine a red brick, just a plain red brick. It's central to the entire construction of a 4-storey building. It suddenly shatters. You can see that if you pull it back into alignment, all will be well, but you can't. Imagine now that brick inside of a human being, the grating noise of that brick, the fact that every function within you starts to become debilitated and unable to operate as normal. Your neck can't support your head. There's pain, a feeling of nausea exuding not from your stomach, but from every pore within your body. Other people laugh at a joke. You laugh too. You still can. But at the end of it, that pain, that nausea, that discomfort is still there. You go on holiday as other people do. They enjoy the view. You sit there just absorbing the view, but absorbing the continuous pressure and pain. Other people eat a meal and enjoy it. You eat a meal because you have to. There's no enjoyment comes from it at all. The pain is just continuous. Last week, as it happened, I had, for the first time in years, what I call a chronic migraine. It lasted 3 days through parliamentary business. In the time I wasn't in the chamber, I was flat on my back, unable to sleep, unable to get any relief from all of that. I participated in a debate. I wrote the speech out because I wasn't sure that I could actually recall or have the ability to construct sentences were it not in front of me. Afterwards, I was told by some people who wrote in it was one of my better speeches, and I'm not quite sure what the moral of that is. But, I mean, it affects your vision. That becomes blurred. You can't concentrate. Even Paul Wheelhouse, the Minister, looked young and Tory again from where I was standing. It's completely and totally debilitating. If I'd had an electric drill suffering a chronic migraine, I could have put it to my head and drilled into the source of the pain to relieve the pressure. So I understand when Susan Archibald said to the Petitions Committee she's considered suicide as a result of the pain she's endured. It becomes a mental health condition. It leads to people who have alcohol problems because they're trying to dull the pain that they're enduring, or to other drug conditions that follow from it. Because you take medication, you get to the end of the prescribed dose, it's made no difference at all. You take more than the prescribed dose, it still makes no difference at all. It is a fundamentally, totally debilitating condition, and you look completely and perfectly normal to everybody else round about you who has no sense of what it is you are suffering or enduring. And for the last 10 years, despite people knowing that we're addressing and talking about it in Parliament, there's been no significant or material progress towards any kind of long-term relief or hope for the sufferers of it. So I do welcome wholeheartedly everything the Cabinet Secretary has had to say this afternoon. And I wasn't being flippant when I said we'd like all three, because I think in many senses those who suffer from it would. I suspect the One Centre has appeal because of the cynicism that has grown up amongst sufferers at the lip service paid by health boards, but the very, very variable delivery of treatment by health boards across Scotland. And the existence of a physical centre is something there that has to exist and be resourced. But yes, I think many people would like the local option of a facility to which they could have access. Because, as Jackie Baillie said, sending people to Bath, he's only been to Bath of late. I mean, that from Scotland is a monumental journey for anybody. I don't suppose taking your family there is equivalent to trying to get there suffering from chronic pain, although with my family it would feel very much the equivalent. But you take your time going down. If you are suffering, imagine a 1,600-mile round-trip journey, suffering with that degree of pain. So the facility in Scotland is a major step forward, and I welcome all of that. When you think that there are some 780,000 people who are suffering not as I do periodically for a 72-hour period, but permanently, weeks on end, permanently all of their lives, then you recognise that this is one of those conditions. It's not sexy in the sense that it's got lots of nurses in front of a brand new shiny building and you can point to it and say, there we are, we've now addressed it. It's one of those conditions which it takes will and courage and a sense of purpose to actually deliver progress on. I think the Cabinet Secretary is up to that task. I'm not going to say he's Prince Charming to the Ice Queen of old. I know Baillie was trying to turn it into that kind of a metaphor. I think he is genuinely committed to us making that kind of progress. In a fraternal way, I will lend my support to Ms Bailey's amendment this afternoon. But more importantly than anything else, I think this has to be the watershed debate after which chronic pain sufferers can say parliamentarians finally rose to the challenge and made a commitment to deliver real relief to those who suffer from it.
Thank you very much. We now turn to the open debate. Speeches of 6 minutes. We are quite tight for time, I'm afraid. Aileen MacLeod, to be followed by Jane Baxter.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I welcome the opportunity to speak in this afternoon's debate on such an important issue as chronic pain, and to see so many people in our public gallery who are here to listen to this afternoon's debate. Now, significant pain is reported to be experienced by 14% of our population, with 6% having severe chronic pain, resulting in a major impact on quality of life, employment, daily activities, our mood, sleep and all aspects of general health and well-being. Now, chronic pain is therefore a sensitive and deeply personal subject for those who suffer it and their loved ones who often suffer with them and can feel so powerless to help. So I'm genuinely pleased to see the commitment the Government is outlining to deliver high-quality chronic pain services at every level of care. And the Scottish Service model for chronic pain, for example, will greatly assist patients' understanding of what support is available and give clinicians and healthcare professionals the knowledge and structure to direct patients and allow consistent care pathways to be followed. And I further welcome the Government's commitment this afternoon to providing a highly specialised pain management service and the announcement today of a public consultation on the options for the future delivery of this service. As a new service for Scotland, this will be a strong addition to the services that are necessary to meet the many and complex needs of those with this debilitating chronic condition that can devastate the lives of patients if appropriate support is not available. Now, Presiding Officer, I'd like to highlight the progressive initiatives that are already taking place in Dumfries and Galloway, which show how the Scottish service model for chronic pain is being implemented locally, based on specific local needs and circumstances. Now, since its formation in April 2012, NHS Dumfries and Galloway's Chronic Pain Improvement Group has been working well, with each of its 5 subgroups developing and taking forward a range of projects to improve the chronic pain care pathway. And an important element of this improvement work is the upskilling of local staff. 20 physiotherapy staff have recently undergone a 2-day cognitive behaviour training course, and community pharmacies have participated in training sessions on chronic pain. Pharmacies have also been circulating patient questionnaires to people who are being prescribed medication for chronic pain, and these responses will be fed into the patient involvement subgroup. Now, NHS Dumfries and Galloway has also agreed to appoint an additional health psychologist post with 2 sessions per week for chronic pain, and this post, in addition to working with patients, will also cover, crucially, the education of GPs and other clinicians. So arrangements are also in place now for GPs and community physiotherapists to use an already much praised electronic referral system to refer patients directly to the Pain Association, which has a funded service agreement with the Health Board. Now, the key point here has to be in assisting people to manage chronic pain themselves by making sure that the necessary support and advice is there, but also giving them the tools to do it themselves where appropriate. It is as much about empowering as it is about prescribing. Now, I know that such examples are being replicated across the country, that some boards are further forward than others in developing their local service delivery plans for implementing the model, but it's important to emphasise that progress is being made, and this is therefore a significant step in ensuring the equity of access to chronic pain services and support across all levels of primary, secondary and tertiary care. Now, prior to consultation, the NHS is working with partners, including patients and clinicians, to assess appropriate options, and the needs of patients at the pinnacle of the Kaiser Permanente pyramid can be challenging to address. Consultation, especially with a small number of patients with the most severe needs, is vital to ensure the most appropriate targeted use of resources and to deliver equity of service for this highly specialised group of patients. So I especially welcome the Government's decision to include appropriate residential accommodation in the options for the intensive patient pain management service. This is fundamental in ensuring that patients get the support they need from the intensive service, and it's vital that this service offers as non-medicalised a routine as possible, and that any accommodation reflects normal aspects of daily living, because this can help patients to maintain progress when they return home. And finally, Presiding Officer, services need to be person-centred. All of the measures within the Government motion add focus and positive direction to chronic pain services, not only at the highly specialised intensive end of the spectrum, but with prevention and secondary care also. Now, with the publication today of the bill to integrate adult health and social care, this approach will help to reduce health inequalities and empower patients with chronic pain to have as full a life as possible. So in closing, Presiding Officer, I think that everyone in this chamber recognises the importance of delivering high-quality services for chronic pain sufferers. There can be nothing more personal than pain. And while we have seen improvements in service provision since 2007, it's equally clear that the Government is resolute on the need to accelerate the delivery of further improvement throughout the spectrum of treatment. Now, yes, it is a work in progress, but I am confident that we are heading in the right direction, and I support the Government's motion this afternoon.
Thank you very much. I call Jane Baxter to be followed by John Wilson.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. As we know, the issue of chronic pain has been subject of parliamentary discussion for over 10 years. In fact, the number of reports into chronic pain which have been produced are quite startling. The cross-party group on chronic pain has highlighted that there have been 5 reports prior to devolution and 4 in the years afterwards. Despite this, chronic pain appears to be one of the ignored issues in the debate about Scotland's health services, so it's welcome that it's finally been given the debate time and attention which it deserves. We know that as recently as 2012, the then Cabinet Secretary for Health answered a parliamentary question stating that there had been insufficient evidence for an economic case to support the development of a residential pain management programme. And whilst there was a commitment to a review by the Chronic Pain Steering Group in the summer of last year, this was, at the time, just one of the latest and varying responses to the recommendations which have been made over the years for pain services in Scotland. I was surprised to learn of the Scottish Government's response regarding a lack of evidence for an economic case and hope that this attitude is shifting. For the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy Scotland has highlighted that the direct healthcare cost of chronic pain in Scotland is around £160 million. But this figure pales in comparison in light of the associated cost to the economy of chronic pain. For example, when you consider the number of lost working days or workers lost to the economy in the UK due to chronic pain, the figure leaps to £1.7 billion. So despite the huge opportunity and economic costs associated with what can be a long-term condition, the level of care available across Scotland is extremely patchy. And unfortunately, it's not just adults who suffer. It has been estimated that up to 80,000 children in Scotland have chronic pain, and worryingly, those children also have the same difficulties in many places of accessing appropriate treatment and support. The Health Improvement Scotland Update report noted that the development of pain services for children in Scotland is at a relatively early stage, and given the numbers of children affected, this is a disappointing statement. Equally disappointing is the postcode lottery of multidisciplinary care, which varies as much across the country for children's pain services as it does for adult services. We know that there are few health boards to offer primary care provision of multidisciplinary pain management for children or adults. And NHS Fife is one of these few. The system for patients with chronic pain, which now exists as the Fife Integrated Pain Management Service, has a single referral system, clear referral criteria and a triage process. Through its approach, the Health Board in Fife is able to refer 1 in 10 of patients with chronic pain to a pain management programme. This may not seem like a high figure, but it compares very well with the shocking experiences of patients in some other health boards whom we have heard about being referred to a pain management programme hundreds of miles away in Bath. The combination of primary and secondary care used by NHS Fife, based on self-management, physiotherapy, and it uses community venues, was developed from work done in West Fife. When it was established some years ago as the Rivers Pain Service, the aim of the physiotherapists and pharmacists involved was to provide services for people coping with chronic pain in local settings, such as community and leisure centres. I am grateful to the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy in highlighting this service to me ahead of the debate today, and I share their view that such community-based treatments are essential in providing pain care programmes which enable those who suffer chronic pain to gain greater control of their condition. And I'd encourage the Scottish Government to look into the Fife example when beginning to implement the Scottish service model for chronic pain, as sadly at the moment it seems that not all examples are as positive as the one I've just outlined. Within the region of Mid-Scotland and Fife, one of my constituents, Linda Penn, who is a patient with another health board, has raised with me her experiences of both the long waiting times she has endured to see a specialist and the difficulties she encountered in accessing treatment. Having waited 12 weeks for an initial appointment with a pain specialist, my constituent waited a further 7 weeks for a 10-minute acupuncture session. And since she is resident in Alloa and being unable to drive, my constituent had to undertake a 1-hour, 20-minute bus journey each way to the pain clinic in Falkirk. Strangely enough, any benefits from the 10-minute treatment at the pain clinic are undone by the round trip of nearly 3 hours journey time. After this debate, I will be raising the detail of my constituent's case with both the Cabinet Secretary and the Health Board. Unfortunately, I am sure the experiences of Linda are not unique, and they serve to highlight the need for a chronic pain residential treatment centre like the one which has been mentioned in Wales. Scottish Labour's amendment today on the need to establish a residential chronic pain centre as a matter of urgency is to be welcomed. I hope that we see improvements right across the board for patients in Scotland with chronic pain as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I call John Wilson, to be followed by Graham Pearson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome today's motion in the name of the Cabinet Secretary on the subject of chronic pain. In many ways, I come to today's debate from the background of being one of the three co-conveners of the cross-party group on chronic pain, along with Jackie Bailey and Jackson Carlow, and on my membership of the Public Petitions Committee, which had a role in considering the petition from Susan Archibald on behalf of the cross-party group to try and take forward the issues that the group have highlighted in relation to chronic pain. Public Petitions Committee has examined the petition, which clearly brought issues of importance into the wider public domain, and I think helped initiate part of today's debate. This is illustrated by the fact that an estimated 800,000 people, including 70,000 children, who suffer from chronic pain at varying levels. Although Healthcare Improvement Scotland provide no definitive figure on the numbers affected by chronic pain, the problem of chronic pain might potentially mean that approximately 18% of the population may well be affected at some point during their lives, according to the sign. I recognise that the Scottish Government considers the best way to fully investigate issues behind chronic pain is by adopting a Scottish service model. The Scottish Government, some 4 years ago, accepted that long-lasting pain was a condition in its own right. That said, there has been criticism of Scotland's health boards with regards to taking the necessary action in a wider Scottish context. The Scottish Government has made a commitment to provide 2-year funding for starting up local service improvement groups. There is a requirement for better collection of data, and this has been recognised in terms of benchmarking. In addition, the NHS Scotland Chief Executive has proactively been looking for feedback from all health boards with regards to how progress is currently being assessed towards the 4 key recommendations. I have touched on the first recommendation with respect to Scottish service model for chronic pain. The Cabinet Secretary quite rightly identified that we also have to look at the social model of care for sufferers of chronic pain. I would like to spend some of my time talking about the second recommendation, working with patients and the voluntary sector. While there is a need for health boards to develop stronger level of participation from patients, some people could argue that patients can be moved around in terms of their treatment. So whether the treatment plan is patient-centred needs to be looked at very carefully. I know the criticism by some from the cross-party group has been that there is little patient representation. The Scottish Government clearly has a role in developing solutions in this matter, and the role can only be successfully implemented by other organisations, jointly working on a shared programme. This is just one aspect of the approach needed to ensure better service delivery of chronic pain cases. Another is what is happening on a practical day-to-day basis. Whilst I recognise the good work taking place in Buchanan Centre in Coatbridge, a primary care facility, it is centralised, and this leads to problems of patients accessing the facility, especially if they stay in outlying villages in Lanarkshire. The most basic building block of the NHS is the general practitioner, and in terms of developing a holistic approach, their role is vital. Although their particular assistance in developing an approach that delivers local clinics run by GPs with a specialised interest is now going to be answered by 10 GPs registering an interest in Lanarkshire. I note and welcome the fact that the Scottish Government has placed a high priority on each health board area, delivering a plan that covers all areas of chronic pain. The Scottish Government is already committed to providing the appropriate residential accommodation, especially for patients whose chronic pain is severe and should limit the impact on people at risk now and in the future. Presiding Officer, I welcome the opportunity to highlight the subject of chronic pain because behind the talk of data collection, it must be remembered that we are talking about real people who at many levels are just trying to get through the day and get through their lives. The impact that it has on the individual in relation to suffering from chronic pain is not just for that individual, it also impacts upon their family life impacts on their day-to-day activities, and it impacts on whether or not they can hold down a job. And we've got to remember that people who want to be active in their communities have got to have the services provided by the Health Board and by other services to ensure that they can continue to lead a fulfilling life and not have a debilitating impact, or their condition have a debilitating impact on their lives. We have to look forward to a situation where chronic pain is taken seriously, not just by the people who suffer from chronic pain, but by all those involved in delivering services, such as the health boards and others, to ensure that when we move forward as a society, that those individuals feel they are part of that society. And I look forward to the initiatives being taken by the Cabinet Secretary today, and look forward to a situation where Scotland does see a comprehensive chronic pain service provided in every part of Scotland, and that health boards play a vital role within that, and that GPs can be seen as the front-line service providers for many patients in Scotland today. And that should be a coordinated approach to ensure that all patients, no matter who they are, receive the treatment they deserve and require. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now calling Graham Pearson, to be followed by Bob Doris. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The NHS faces many challenges and often responds to those challenges by delivering positive outcomes. Chronic pain has and is, however, the ghost in the machine. Affecting thousands of Scots, chronic and sometimes also severe pain results in long-term suffering for patients, apparently without meaningful support and treatment. The presence of campaigners here today reflects the dire needs which exist there in the real world. Chronic pain, pain that is continuous over an extended period of time, is a blight on the lives of thousands of Scots, and our debate today must focus on how to support individuals and the families affected. As the Cabinet Secretary has acknowledged, it ought to go without saying that Scots who suffer chronic pain should have access to the full range of available treatment here in Scotland. Yet too many patients are being forced to travel to other parts of the UK for support. Scots not getting access to the treatment they need has been a running theme in this chamber over the last few weeks. And unfortunately, the postcard lottery of chronic pain services means that it is likely to continue today. The Cabinet Secretary also acknowledged that some 800,000 Scots, including 70,000 children, suffer from chronic pain. To obtain some relief, a lucky few, if you can call them lucky, have to travel the 400 miles or more to specialist treatment. The cost of sending some 20 people a year to Bath and Somerset for treatment at a specialist unit runs to some £250,000. Surely money better spent providing treatment here in Scotland. And I welcome the Cabinet Secretary's commitment to resolve this matter. I would also raise concerns at this time about how a Scottish Government plans to continue any treatment arrangements, such as those in Bath and in independent Scotland, although perhaps that's a debate for another day. Health Improvement Scotland, its update report on Scottish pain management services, reported that 75% of the population now have access to pain management programmes. However, the report has been widely discredited, as mentioned, where true statistics show that barely 64% of Scots have access to pain management programme, and waiting times are significantly longer than claimed. Dealing with chronic pain is a hard enough issue as it is, without the Government massaging the figures and hiding the scale of the problem from the public. His report did, however, expose significant variations in treatment across Scotland, noting the majority of NHS boards provided community-based pain services, not clinician-led. At the moment, those suffering from chronic pain do face a postcode lottery for access to day clinics, and if they require specialist treatment, they currently face that 800-mile or more round trip to Bath. This seems ludicrous, and whilst simultaneously the travel causes additional grief and stress. We must, of course, not ignore the fact that chronic pain is generally not an ailment in itself and often accompanying symptoms of other illnesses or injury. The Government must ensure that root problems are also catered for and are dealt with by staff who well understand the problems. We must achieve a balance between providing care and treatment for the underlying causes such as arthritis, cancer and MS, whilst also offering dedicated medical support to deal with the resulting chronic pain. I think it important to acknowledge the promises of Scottish Government and give credit to Alec Neil for his pledge to improve the specialist care on offer to Scots who suffer from chronic pain. I must close by commending the work of the cross-party group on chronic pain, particularly that of the co-conveners Jackie Bailey, John Wilson and Jackson Carlaw. They have acknowledged that over the last decade minor improvements have been made, but the well-documented major issues still need to be addressed. I hope that the Cabinet Secretary and his colleagues will, in his consultation, consider carefully the recommendations from all relevant organisations in order to ensure that those suffering from chronic pain have access to much-needed support and treatment. I hope he delivers action and real services in addition to his words today. In the 11 years since the last parliamentary debate on chronic pain, a debate which prompted a record level of interest, the vast majority of feedback seems to indicate that little has changed. Hopefully this debate brings focus on effective treatment and we can now make it happen. I support Jackie Bailey's amendment. Thanks, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. I now call on Bob Doris to be followed by Gil Patterson. Up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I think I should maybe note Mr Pearson's speech seemed to be a speech of two halves. I thought the first half of the tone was just a little bit wrong, and to bring independence into the consensual debate like this, I don't understand. It's a complete non sequitur. It's a bit insulting to the substance of this debate, but out of character. But there we are. Can I pay tribute, as others have done, to Susan Archibald and her petition? And for all those involved in the wider campaign to improve the situation for those living with chronic pain. It's not an issue I have particularly followed closely in the past. This is an opportunity for me to find out more, although having said that, I do have a number of individual constituents who have made representations to me in the past about issues they've had. Indeed, I'm sure we all have, as I have a family member who lives with chronic pain. I think we can all see the social consequences and emotional consequences of that as much as the medical consequences of that as well. I actually do want to welcome progress made in relation to chronic pain. However, in doing so, I do note the concerns from the cross-party group on chronic pain who supplied a briefing for this afternoon's debate, and also from Health and Social Care Alliance. They both raised concerns over the pace of implementation of recommendations which started back as early as 2007 in terms of the GRIPS report and in terms of the different progress made by each of the 14 health boards. So I do believe there has been progress, but we have to draw attention to the fact that others have raised some concerns in relation to that. And it is, of course, right that passionate, committed campaigners should be in a hurry to see progress in chronic pain management made as quickly as possible. That is the role of doughty campaigners, and I pay tribute to them for that. Health boards and government, though, have to seek a planned approach to developing new or improved services, and the important date for many will be April 2014, by which time every health board will need to have a chronic pain service delivery plan in place. Given that we have had a national lead clinician since 2009, whose job it is to spearhead and champion the development of pain management services, and that they have developed a national chronic pain steering group, as well as developing a Scottish service model for chronic pain, I would welcome information from the Scottish Government in relation to the degree of preparedness for the 8 April 2014 deadline. For many, that is seen as an end point to having a comprehensive system in place for tackling chronic pain, not a starting point, and more information in terms of the preparedness of each of the health boards would be welcome. I feel there are also a new set of sign guidelines, which should no doubt underpin any managed clinical network and how that will work. And I note that Greater Glasgow and Clyde do now have a managed clinical network in relation to the management of chronic pain. More interested to know how the care pathways will also work for those living with chronic pain and how they will seek support in reality. So not just how the documentation looks on file and the briefings look when they're provided to MSPs, but actually what the reality is for those living with chronic pain on the ground. So I'd also welcome more information as to how the Scottish Government will ensure a consistent approach across all the health boards as to the quality of services that they provide. But when I talk about a consistent approach, there obviously does have to be the need for localised delivery models, and that's what I want to concentrate much of my speech on this afternoon. One of the organisations locally in Maryhill that I work with is MS Revive. Multiple sclerosis has been a significant cause of chronic pain for many, and some of the services they provide include physiotherapy, aromatherapy, reflexology, counselling, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, speech and language therapy, including swallowing and cognitive advice. I could go on and give lots of more of the services they provide, but the important thing is they provide a holistic approach to helping those living with MS, living with chronic pain, and their families to support them in the community. And it's important that, whilst they have got a base in the north of Glasgow, they also do a series of outreach works in Paisley, in Douglas, and Hamilton, and Glasgow South Side and beyond. So when we look at the network of support that's available for those living with chronic pain, it's important, as some others have said, that we do look to see what the third and the voluntary sector can do to provide support within that area. What I wanted to do is put on record what a lady called Jenny Wilson-Best said in relation to Revive MS, who is an ambassador for the organisation. She said, "Revive offer many different therapies, but for me it was for the fatigue management group that allowed me to find myself again. I renamed it the anger management, then the sadness management, and finally the acceptance management. I cried a lot, but I don't cry anymore. Now I get on with my life and I live it to the full. I still suffer fatigue and chronic pain and have learned how to use my wheelchair, but thanks to Revive, I have found a path upon which I can walk." Now, the reason I use that quote is people may not consider organisations such as Revive MS as being necessarily clinician-led, but they're a quality service that provides people support with chronic pain. And we need to make sure, when we look at the overall strategy in each health board area, there is breathing space for organisations such as MS Revive. I should, I suppose, put on record in mentioning them, they did recently get a £20,000 grant from the Scottish Government to provide an additional support worker for their outreach work. And finishing off,
should be drawing to a close,
Presiding
please.
Officer, I just want to say organisations such as that should be looking for both health boards and local authorities to disinvest some of their own funds towards organisations like that, with health and social care integration for a holistic approach to tackling chronic pain within our communities.
Many thanks. Now call on Gil Patterson to be followed by Hanzala Malik. Up to 6 minutes, please.
Presiding Officer, I welcome the opportunity to speak in this debate from both a personal and general perspective. Personal in that I have suffered from chronic pain, and I can fully appreciate the background and experience of the issue and the impact the implementation of the Scottish Service model on chronic pain will have on sufferers across Scotland. General in that, as a former member of the cross-party group on chronic pain, a group that does sterling work in this area, and through my daily constituency duties as an MSP, I have met a large number of people from all different backgrounds who have been afflicted with chronic pain at some point in their lives, and who have helped to shape policies that can support sufferers and their families. For me, there are two aspects of chronic pain, the first being the debilitating effects that severe acute continuing pain has, not only on your body but on your mind. The inability to physically function to do some simple tasks is difficult to explain to those who have not suffered the impact and effects of chronic pain. The second aspect is what people think. As far as my own situation goes, I appear to look okay on the outside, but the embarrassment in asking a workmate, and in my case an employee, to lift a package no heavier than a pint of milk to my car left me with a deep feeling of guilt, and that my employee thought, he's at it. Funny enough, I put up with this situation for years until my good friend Alec Neil, now the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Wellbeing, accidentally found out about my situation and advised me how to seek a solution. That was a fair number of years ago, and it's his good advice that started my recovery. How many people were in a similar situation to mine, but were not as fortunate to receive this valuable information is difficult to calculate. But I believe that the stigma and lack of understanding attached to chronic pain has been drastically reduced over the past years. That is why I am pleased that the Scottish Government is continuing to attach such importance to this issue, as there is almost 18% of the Scottish population who may have been affected at some point of time in their lives. That amounts to, what I'm sure you will agree, a large proportion of our people, which makes it more than likely that nearly every family in Scotland contains a member or a friend who has, at one time or another, suffered from chronic pain. Over recent years, there has been a marked improvement towards tackling pain, not only in attitude, but also in action. And I believe the establishment of a national lead clinician in 2009 has been a very important step in acknowledging the impact that chronic pain has on the lives of so many people, and it's what led to the debate that we are having this afternoon. The Scottish Government should be praised for funding this position, as we are now seeing its hard work coming to fruition. The National Chronic Pain Steering Group, which was established by the lead clinician, has played a fundamental role in developing a model that will help all those sufferers. The steering group has developed Scottish service model of chronic pain over a number of years, and I feel that it offers a valuable approach in dealing with the varying and somewhat complex levels of this condition to ensure the best outcomes for the care and support of people living with chronic pain. There must be a complete understanding of what chronic pain is and how best to treat it. The challenge for the service models is to ensure this is the case, and I believe that we are on the right road to improving the understanding as well as the prevention and management of it. One recent concern regarding care for those with chronic pain is the disparity in the range of services and resources across different health boards. By implementing the service model across NHS Scotland, I believe that this variation will be addressed, which will have a positive impact on sufferers across Scotland. I'm very pleased indeed that the Scottish Government is fully committed to implementing the service model, but it is only through close cooperation between the Government, the National Lead Clinician and the Steering Group, Healthcare Scotland and health boards will we see the model implemented across Scotland successfully. Of course, at the present time, there are a number of people who have to travel out with our country to Bath Centre for Pain Services. I've got to make it clear, I would have travelled to the ends of the earth to relieve the pain that I was suffering for. And of course, at the present time, there are a number of people who have to travel out with their country to Bath, and it's good that the Government is taking action on that. I very much welcome the Government's commitment to consult with interested parties to ensure that we have those specialist facilities available here in Scotland. I'm not sure, I'll be honest, what the best model is. I like the idea to consult and talk to all the interested parties. They're the people that we should be engaging with. Since 2007, there has been a huge improvement in the provision of chronic pain services, but we must never rest on our laurels. We must continue to build on these improvements, and by supporting this motion, I believe positive progress will be made. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Now call on Hanzala Malik to be followed by Joan McAlpine. Up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and good afternoon. I welcome the opportunity to talk about access to services for people living with chronic pain. It is an issue that I personally have experience of, coming as a great-grandmother, son, father and grandfather, 4 generations family. It is fair to say that we are regular customers of the National Health Service in some form or another. In the report 2012 on Pain Management Services Healthcare Improvement Scotland report that states pain is not consistently managed across the whole of the health and social care systems at present. And I was shocked to read, according to the report, the average waiting time for the first referral's appointment was 11 weeks in Scotland, and even that is not the full picture. Based on my personal experience waiting for appropriate treatment for several months, it is extremely debilitating if that's the real fact of the matter, as some patients are sent from pillar to post, and patient is often confused about what to do, where to go for real help. Patients can feel that their problem is not being taken seriously, and in my case, I felt uncomfortable being given higher and higher doses of medication, but the proper solution to what problems I had were not being addressed, as I felt immediately. And at one stage, a doctor suggested I consider going private. I was quite astonished that an NHS doctor would make such a suggestion. Coming from the Labour Party, and my doctor who I was speaking to knew that I'm a socialist and I would never consider that. I put that point to him, and then I went on to say to him, you do appreciate I'm a Muslim, and despite the fact I'm a Muslim, if the press got a hold of that, they would crucify me. So he appreciated my dilemma, and then sort of looking for other avenues in which he can possibly help me. So I have to say that hence, I'm glad that the Scottish Government has begun to deal with the issue around consistency in chronic pain services. But these are early stages, early steps. And I wish you well, genuinely do, because a lot of people are suffering unnecessarily. The postcode lottery, once again, this is an issue that needs to be addressed. I think that a lot of people use the phrase postcode lottery and they assume that everybody understands. But I think the people who suffer really understand when they see the indifference that happens amongst the communities, and sometimes that creates a lot of ill feeling. And not only is one suffering, but then also one is feeling that they are perhaps not being looked after as well as other members of the community are. Waiting times for access to chronic pain services needs to be improved. That's been demonstrated, and we're aware of that. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank Jackson Carlo for the description he today drew of people who suffer from migraine. My wife suffered from migraine for years, and up until today, I hadn't realized how badly I've treated her. I have never taken her ailment seriously, and I will today apologize to her now that I've realized how badly she does suffer. When she mopes about in a house like somebody out of space, I can now understand why. So thank you for that description, and I take that on board. And I also want to say something to the Cabinet Secretary, and that is, sir, the amendment from the Labour Party is a very reasonable one. The suggestion that is made is reasonable. I don't think it is going to challenge you in accepting it, and therefore I would genuinely hope and wish that you will actually take it on board before the end of business today, because it's not a party-based issue. It's an issue about caring for the communities. I'm a sufferer. Many other members in this chamber today have shared their experiences with you. We're talking from experience. We're not looking at reports. We're not looking at fancy graphs that consultants produce for you. We're talking about real people with real issues, and what we're saying is from our heart, and we're wishing you well in what you're trying to do. And hence, I can't emphasize enough how important this amendment really is, and I hope and wish that members will take this on board today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'll now call on Joan McAlpine to be followed by Jim Hume. Up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I too welcome the campaigners to the gallery today, and I particularly acknowledge the presence of the petitioner Susan Archibald. I had the great pleasure of hearing Susan speak at the recent demonstration against Trident in Glasgow, and she spoke very eloquently about the scandal of paying for nuclear weapons on the one hand, while vulnerable and disabled people, including those suffering from chronic pain, are being punished by welfare cuts and things like the bedroom tax. Before addressing the motion directly, I wanted to raise an issue about priorities in much the same way as Susan Archibald talked about priorities when she condemned the amount spent on Trident at that demonstration I heard her speak at. There have been comments made recently about the availability on prescription of painkillers such as paracetamol and those based on aspirin in the NHS. And it has been suggested by some that, as prescriptions have been made free in Scotland, that such medicines are a waste of money. But this debate perhaps offers an opportunity to remind ourselves that chronic pain is a very serious condition requiring medication and painkillers, and it would be wrong to punish those with that serious condition by charging them for their care. Chronic pain is, of course, a long-term condition, and it is those who suffer from long-term conditions whose plight was recently highlighted in a report called Paying the Price, which looked at the effects of prescription charges in England. It was written by the Prescription Charges Coalition that comprises 20 organisations representing patients, many of whom suffer from chronic pain. These included the Arthritis Care and the National Rheumatoid Arthritis Society and Disability Rights UK. Of the 4,000 people surveyed, 73% paid for the prescriptions, and 35% of them had on occasion failed to pick up a prescription because of cost. That's also reflected in other polls. A Mori survey for Citizens' Advice found that 800,000 people in England had failed to collect a prescription in 2007 because of cost, and as we know, the cost has risen considerably since then. So although today we will look at the work that needs to be done to help develop specialised services for those with chronic pain and the work that's already been done, we should not overlook the benefits that introducing free prescriptions have brought to such patients. No, I want to make progress, thank you. I'm fortunate in not having suffered serious illness in my life, and I've only experienced severe pain on 2 or 3 occasions because of toothache and childbirth, both of which have thankfully ended quickly. But I do know people who suffer from chronic pain, and I've seen how dreadful and how debilitating it can be. While with good services it can be managed, it can also result in the individual becoming completely housebound and isolated, in my experience. And therefore I welcome the Cabinet Secretary's commitment to community-based services, primary care services and a social model of care, because for some sufferers that is the only delivery they would be able to access. I'm also very glad to hear the Cabinet Secretary say he intends to end the situation where unwell people travel to Bath and Somerset. Bath is, I am told, a very attractive city. It's still on my list of those I wish to visit, but it's one that we should visit voluntarily for pleasure, not out of necessity.
Will the member give way?
Yes, I
appreciate she wants to make headway in this, but 2 or 3 members have referred to going to Bath as though it was like going to Mars. If I need specialist treatment, I'll go wherever it is, and it's unrealistic to imagine that either Scotland or England will contain all the centres of excellence.
McAlpine.
Yes, I think that's a reasonable point to make, and I was actually going to address the substance of the point that she made. The nature of residential treatment in Scotland, I welcome the fact that the Cabinet Secretary is consulting on the type of residential treatment to deliver in Scotland. That seems to me eminently sensible, because having just one centre in the Central Belt, however specialised, could mean long and uncomfortable journeys from the far north of Scotland, and indeed from less accessible parts of the south of Scotland, which I represent. It's therefore encouraging to hear, it's also encouraging to hear of the development that's happening right across the country to deliver care to people where they live, and it was encouraging to hear from Aileen MacLeod of the considerable progress being made in Dumfries and Galloway in establishing a service improvement group. I welcome the Cabinet Secretary's commitment to reduce waiting times, and I agree that the integration of health and social care, which we will be legislating on, is particularly relevant to the sufferers of chronic pain. And it is so important, as the Cabinet Secretary says, to give sufferers a real say in how their services are delivered. I think it's important to remember that the progress that has been made to date. In 2007, only one NHS board had a pain management programme. In 2013, 5 boards have a pain management programme. And from April 2014, as has been said, every health board will be required to produce a chronic pain service delivery plan. Presiding Officer, 75% of the adult population in Scotland now have access to a pain management programme, and I welcome the Cabinet Secretary's commitment to raise that to 100%. It is clear from his comments today that the Scottish Government is committed to enhancing the provision of chronic pain services, building on improvements that have been made, and I welcome the opposition speakers who have acknowledged the sincerity of the Cabinet Secretary's commitment, and it is in that spirit of respect and cooperation that will help us build on the progress that has been made to date. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Call on Jim Hume to be followed by Stuart Stevenson. Up to 6 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I, as a Lib Dem spokesman on health, first begin also today by paying tribute to Suzanne Archibald, Dorothy Grace Elder, Jackie Ford, and of course their colleagues on the Chronic Pain Cross-Party Group. The Cross-Party Group can take huge credit for today's debate. It's because of their campaigning that the way we deal with chronic pain in Scotland is given the much-needed spotlight it deserves today. We know that Health Improvement Scotland defines chronic pain as continuous long-term pain lasting more than 12 weeks, and we know that from evidence from SIGN that as many as 18% of our population suffer from chronic pain, and 8% of sufferers are children. I want to focus briefly on what chronic pain actually means to the sufferers and their families. Some members have managed to articulate that today themselves, and I hope that Susan Archibald won't mind if I refer to her particular circumstances in order to illustrate the point. Susan, like many at the worst end of suffering, was driven to attempt suicide because of having to deal with the constant non-stop pain, started swallowing pills while her husband and children were asleep, and was saved by her babies crying. That act of desperation at a very low point was possibly a sad reflection of the deficiencies in the current provision of pain management services. Although some improvements have been made, the pace of change has been slow and gaps still remain. But thankfully, Susan has used her experiences of dealing with chronic pain to good use in her campaigning efforts, and I congratulate her and her colleagues on bringing their petition to this Scottish Parliament. But sadly, we know that chronic pain has a tragically high rate of suicide and attempted suicide. It can be linked to depression. People might not be able to hold down a job, and of course that has all sorts of knock-on consequences for home and family life. Not many may know, but today is actually World MS Day. Bob Doris has already mentioned multiple sclerosis. A couple of weeks ago I visited the MS Therapy Centre Lothian here in Edinburgh, which covers Fife and the Borders too, and spoke at length with the manager there, Nancy Campbell. Her team and some of the centre users, we've discussed issues such as the practical challenges MS sufferers face. It was clear from those discussions that the physical effects of the condition are wide-ranging and can really be pinned down to 1, 2 or 3 main symptoms, each sufferer being different, and so in creating a model for chronic pain, we need a system that can work for individual patients. The problem of treating chronic pain in Scotland is not a new one. Evidence is telling us that chronic pain is not treated in the same way throughout our country. Up and down the country, patients and health groups tell us there is too much regional variation, and at the moment we can't be assured that the best treatment is being provided to patients equally. We often talk about postcode lotteries within the health sector, and in this case the failure to address chronic pain management effectively across the board would seem to represent a health inequality with a huge human cost. So, as Liberal Democrats, we welcome today's plans for a Scottish service model for chronic pain, which would see NHS boards implementing a service delivery plan from next year. It's important to say at this point that the forthcoming legislation to integrate social work and NHS services, I think, will be an opportune time to ensure that chronic pain management doesn't fall between the bailiwicks of those two organisations. We also support the aspiration for more management of chronic pain to be undertaken within the community. It's common sense that people should be treated and supported as close to home as possible, rather than having to travel into hospital or, in some cases, as far away as Bath or perhaps Somerset. This, of course, will require improved understanding amongst GPs, so we also look forward to the publication of the SIGN guidelines next year. We're in a day for welcoming, but the commitment is also welcome to consider options for a specialist residential facility in Scotland, which would hopefully ensure that patients who need this level of care no longer have to travel to Bath. But I believe that we need the consultation to run before we recommend what would be the best approach. Alongside effective treatment, self-management techniques and support can be critical in helping people to take greater control over their condition and enjoy better lives. Better partnership working between the NHS, social care and third-party sectors is crucial in improving support for self-management. But people should know where to get help, and therefore we also welcome the community pharmacy campaign highlighting where people can find reliable information on pain management. There's still a long way to go in Scotland, nobody's doubting that, particularly, I think, in children's pain services. This will have to be a major part of health services implementation of a Scottish model. Children, I think, are particularly vulnerable. As I said, 8% are estimated to be suffering from chronic pain, and that can undoubtedly interfere with their quality of life and, of course, their education. So I think we need to build on that as a matter of urgency, and I look forward to hearing from the Minister and Cabinet Secretary in due course on that specific point. Presiding Officer, we welcome the plans for a Scottish service model for chronic pain. It's long overdue. Chronic pain is perhaps a misunderstood part of our health service and hasn't been afforded the focus it deserves. I hope that today's debate is a marker for change. Thank you.
Many thanks. And now Colin Stewart-Stevenson to be followed by Fiona MacLeod. Up to 6 minutes, please, Mr Stevenson.
Thank you very much indeed, Presiding Officer. I'm slightly surprised we've got quite this far down the speaking order without perhaps exploring in more structured way that there are a large variety of pains, a large variety of chronic pains. Now, we have had mention from Jackson Carlaw of his migraine, Graham Pearson, I think, referred to arthritis, and others have made references to particular kinds of pain. But I think the Minister's announcement of a consultation to look at 3 options, and indeed the consultation may throw up other options, is quite proper because there are so many different sources of and effects of pain and of chronic pain that it may not be a simple solution as perhaps the Labour amendment suggests it is. And I want to illustrate that with a few examples, some of which are close to home, some of which not quite so. First of all, my mother, who as a youngster was an active tennis player, developed arthritis in her late 30s, early 40s, eventually had to have her hips, which is where she was most affected, immobilised because it was before the days of hip replacement, and ultimately the muscles in her thighs cut to prevent movement. She suffered pain of excruciating nature for the rest of her life. So in our family we lived with that, and with the reality that relatively little in those days could be done about it. Now, my mother wasn't miserable with this. She lived with it and coped with it as she had to. And as a little 4 foot 10 and a half inches lady, she
was running around on elbow crutches for most of her adult life. But when she got in her Mini Cooper S, and I remember being with her on one occasion on the Bagley Straight up the Bridge of Erne doing 100 miles an hour, she was liberated by some of the technology. This is before Barbara Castle brought the 70-mile-an-hour limit in, just in case anyone thinks otherwise. So we lived with that, and there was no remedy. When I started as a nurse in a psychiatric hospital, as a fresh-faced, innocent 17-year-old in 1964, my first task was to go and see Jimmy in the corner. And I was told he's got a problem with his legs. And I asked Jimmy what his problem was. He said, it's my legs. I said, what's the problem, Jimmy? He said, my legs. Eventually, I did, of course, roll back the sheets. There were no legs. And he was suffering the substantial pain that amputees can often suffer after the removal of the source of the pain. So the treatment he might require for his pain, quite different. Now, in those days, it was very simple. We simply gave him as much codeine as he wanted, as a result of which he was addicted to the painkillers. So it was very much, one or the other in those days. For my own part, I've had intermittent bouts of pain, I think rather less than some that have been described here, in particular in my neck. Very fortunately, it turned out to be a trapped nerve, which I suffered for probably 4 or 5 months, and a single session of manipulation has relieved it, and it's never come back for 30 years. So that was terrific. More seriously, as an adolescent, I had to have my torso flayed to remove the outer surface of the skin. That took 6 months, an extremely painful operation that had to take place. And that was because of my acne was so severe. Think of the things I tell you. You're not going to tell anybody outside the chamber, are you? But the reality is that there are many different sources of pain and many different treatments for pain. My father, who was a GP, used to use hypnosis to help his patients deal with pain. And indeed, I was taught some hypnotic trips to deal with my asthma. And to this day, I'm able to deal with my asthma without medication. And I was very lucky to get a top-up on my hypnotic charms and ability to control my own pain by Yvonne Gillan, who was an actress, incidentally, in Fawlty Towers on one occasion. She is a specialist in this for people who are in the acting profession, and I had some dealings with her. Jim Hume also talked about young people in pain, and I think, again, we're looking at something quite different. So there are a huge variety of different sources and types of pain that will need to be dealt in different ways. I don't think we should talk down Bath too much. They've 2,000 years of experience of dealing with pain. The Romans made them a spa town where they treated both physical and mental pain. So it's probably a very good place. It's just a shame we can't move it a little closer to the patients that need to have their help in Scotland. Let me just conclude by saying there is one final thing that we haven't yet heard about, and that is pain at end of life. I think we've seen great improvements in the hospice movement of how we manage pain at end of life. I think that, again, is a very different thing that we need to deal with. We do have to remember, however, pain has a purpose to prevent us from damaging ourselves when there is damage there already. Pain alerts us to that. But I very much welcome what the Minister has said to us today. I look forward to the outcome of the consultation. Presiding Officer.
Many thanks. I now call on Fiona MacLeod to be followed by Siobhan McMahon. Up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In my contribution, I want to concentrate on the Level 3 programmes for pain management and specifically with the residential requirements that we need. But before I start, I would really like to pay tribute to the contributions of Jackson Carlaw and Hanzala Malik. As someone who herself suffers from chronic pain, I think they both summed up just how important this debate is. I had a dreadful episode with my sciatica at the weekend where I wasn't sure whether I wanted to murder other people or myself. So it is a very important and serious issue. in specifically talking about residential requirements, we've heard about Bath, and about 27 patients attend there from Scotland every year at a cost of about £251,000 per annum. And I was delighted that following the GRIPS report in 2003, we set up a short life working group which met for the first time on the 1st of March this year. And I understand that it met again this morning. And this morning's meeting was for the purpose of producing an options paper by mid-June on the need for residential pain management service in Scotland. And I was so delighted then when the Cabinet Secretary told us in his opening remarks that he is going out to consultation on 3 different models of this Level 3 pain management project. So I think, when looking at the Labour's amendment, when we talk about a short life working groups getting set up in March and the Cabinet Secretary telling us today that he wants the results by September, that's 6 months. I think that is a degree of urgency. I'm sorry, Ms Bailey, but I'm very short of time, and I do want to concentrate on a suggestion that I have to make to the Cabinet Secretary. But first, can I talk, what is a Level 3 programme? Level 3 programmes are about therapeutic care for those with pain. It's also about teaching us pain management skills, and it's delivered by interdisciplinary teams. And what we're hoping to achieve through that is the reduction of pain, but also the reduction in the impact of that pain, because at the end of it, we want each individual that suffers from chronic pain to be able to live the fullest life that they can. So at this point, Cabinet Secretary, I would like to make my contribution to the consultation, and this is entirely a personal contribution. And I would like to start by saying that I believe that we do have a residential facility in Scotland that could become that residential pain management centre. And if I may quote about it, and I quote, "This purpose-built 15-bed hospital is a place of calm, light and healing. A superb project incorporating creativity within tight controls and a fine example for future healthcare buildings to emulate." That was the citation in the Scottish Enterprises Dynamic Place Awards in 2002 for the fairly recently opened Glasgow Homeopathic Hospital, opened in 1999. But as many people will know, the Glasgow Homeopathic Hospital nowadays is the NHS Centre for Integrative Care. Now, that hospital building is capable of treating 10,000 outpatients and 500 inpatients every year with its 15 beds. I worked there as the librarian in 2004 to 2008, so of course I have an interest, but I also have an understanding of the services that are delivered in that NHS building. In the years that I was there, they set up the CFS-ME project and service delivery. They moved on after I left to the wellness programme. These are holistic, multidisciplinary, allopathic and complementary services. They treat people with long-term chronic conditions. In fact, many of the patients at that hospital at the moment are patients that were considered untreatable and incurable. They have done so well in the work that they have done over those years that their physio, Stephanie Wilson, is award-winning for the delivery of her programmes for ME and wellness. I should, of course, say that Stephanie Wilson is a very close friend of mine, but well worth the accolade that she received a few years ago. So, in closing, Presiding Officer, Cabinet Secretary, I would like to say to you that we have the building, we have the staff, we have the reputation and we have the beds. So I do hope that you would consider this building as in part of your consultation on looking for a centre for pain management in Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call on Siobhan McMahon to be followed by Sandra White. Up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'm pleased to speak in this afternoon's debate. It's an important debate and one that I know will be followed with interest by many across Scotland today, not least those joining us in the public gallery. I was surprised to learn that this was the first full parliamentary debate on chronic pain this Parliament has ever had. I know that members' debate has been held on the subject, however, I am concerned that a subject which affects so many lives across our country has never been given this level of attention before. One thing is certain, this will not be the last debate we hold on this subject. I welcome the fact that the Scottish Government plans to implement the Scottish model for chronic pain, and I am pleased that the NHS have already begun working with patients and clinicians to agree the most appropriate option for a Scottish intensive pain management service. As others have mentioned, the cross-party group on chronic pain have labelled this debate a landmark one. I hope that members of the group feel that this afternoon's contributions have lived up to that status. According to NHS, chronic pain is very common. Around 1 in 5 people have continuous pain. In 2008, the Lancashire Health Survey showed that 26% of Lancashire adults' population were affected by chronic pain. This means that an estimated 120,000 people in Lancashire could live with pain. It is therefore pleasing to me that NHS Lancashire recognise this problem and were one of the first health boards in Scotland to offer primary care pain management services. We all know that access to NHS pain clinics can be a postcode lottery that becomes even more apparent for a regional list member. I am lucky that in my own area of Central Scotland, if a constituent lives within the NHS Lancashire or NHS Forth Valley area, they can access a primary care multidisciplinary pain management service. However, for people living in other areas of Scotland, this isn't the case. That is why it is so essential that we move to a clinician-led service across Scotland. Where you live should not determine the level of healthcare you receive. And we should also provide, as Jackie Bailey said earlier, enough clinicians and enough support for people living in those areas. It's not good enough to say that the services are there when, of course, you have to wait your turn and not seen correctly. And therefore, I hope that that's addressed throughout the consultation and on the recommendations that the Scottish Government do make to NHS Scotland. In recent weeks, we have heard examples of people having to leave their home in Scotland and travel to England for the health treatment they so vitally need and deserve. Those who suffer from chronic pain are no different. It is truly shocking that in 2013, someone who has a chronic pain illness such as ME, MS, arthritis, or the many other conditions would have to leave their home and travel to England for treatment, not just across the border either, but to places such as Bath and Somerset. I can only imagine what travelling that distance will do to someone already suffering ill health. That is one of the reasons I welcome the Scottish Government's intention to build our own dedicated service in Scotland. The other reason is a financial one. It does not seem reasonable to me to spend over £1 million in the last few years sending people for treatment out with Scotland, when other Scottish patients can and do get the help and assistance they require within their own health board. Of course, they will only get that as an outpatient basis, and that is why the sooner residential accommodation is built, the better. Having read the briefings for today's debate, I was concerned to note that although Scotland has a good Scottish service model for chronic pain, it is not implemented throughout Scotland. I would therefore be grateful to know what precise action the Cabinet Secretary will take to ensure that the model the Government plans to implement will help everyone in Scotland. I have already welcomed the work the Scottish Government is planning to do, but we all know that it will not happen overnight. It is therefore essential that the strategies, plans and clinics already in place give the much-needed help and assistance required by patients and their families today, and do not wait for the action that has still to come. I am not a member of the cross-party group on chronic pain, unlike other members who have spoken today. However, I am a member of the cross-party group on disability, and it is through that membership that I met Susan Archibald. Susan has rightly been given credit by others in the Chamber today for bringing this matter to the forefront of our minds as a result of the petition she brought before the Public Petitions Committee. It is never easy to speak about the personal aspects of your life, but particularly if this involves speaking about being disabled. Susan, however, went one step further and shared with us how desperate she had been to end the pain she had felt consistently for over 13 years. I know that Susan would not have taken such a decision lightly, and the last thing in her mind would have been to get praise for doing so. But it is by her brave actions that this subject has finally got the recognition it deserves. Susan's experiences are all the more poignant as we know that she isn't alone. There will be others who have contemplated ending their own life, and there will be others who have done just that. We cannot allow another person to feel that way or indeed take their own life. It is therefore crucial, as the Cabinet Secretary mentioned earlier, that mental health services are also integrated into the future plans and strategies. This vital service cannot be left outside this multidisciplinary approach. I believe that this service will be relied on heavily in the months and years to come, not not only as a result of the mental health anguish chronic pain patients go through, but by this being compounded by welfare reform. Those already receiving benefits are going through their medical assessments now, and some are finding themselves either being put on a lower level of benefit or being removed entirely. I know that it is not of the Scottish Government's making, but I would urge them to be mindful of chronic pain sufferers when looking at ways to mitigate against this pernicious policy. I urge the Scottish Government to take action today to implement the Scottish model for chronic pain across Scotland and establish a specialist intensive pain management centre without delay. We can't afford to wait any longer. Thank you.
Many thanks. I now call on Sandra White to be followed by Margot MacDonald. Up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And like other members, I want to pay tribute to the many campaigners who have worked tirelessly to ensure that the issue of chronic pain is at the top of the agenda. And in particular, special thanks must go to Susan Archibald, who, like Joan McAlpine, I also met on the march in Glasgow at George Square, and was absolutely bowled over by her sheer frustrations and what was happening, not just within, the health service in certain aspects, particularly in prescription charges, but also in her tenacity to push forward anything at all. And she spoke very eloquently in regards to the bedroom tax and welfare changes also. And also Jackie Ford, obviously, not only for their hard work, but as I said before, the sheer tenacity to bringing this forward. And I think, like the Cabinet Secretary, I remember only too well the very early days in this Parliament when Dorothy Race-Elder took up the cudgel, and I think that was her words, cudgel, on behalf of chronic pain sufferers. And I do in fact welcome her back to the Scottish Parliament here today, along with others. I know she worked long and hard to make sure that this was at the top of the agenda. So thanks, Dorothy Race-Elder and all the others who have worked tirelessly to bring this forward. Now, I welcome the announcement by the Cabinet Secretary of the provision of residential accommodation. And I do look forward to the ideas coming forward. But I must admit, I was very taken by Fiona MacLeod's suggestion of the homeopathic hospital. To me, it's certainly a very interesting one, and is one of quite a few MSPs, actually, who brought forward the idea of the homeopathic hospital here to the Scottish Parliament when it was under threat of closure, and worked very well with MSPs from all parties to debate this particular issue. I think Fiona MacLeod has got a very, very good idea. It is a fantastic building. Basically, the hospital is in a fantastic site, very easy to reach, etc. It's in a very good setting, and it offers fantastic treatment. And I know probably a number of people may have visited the homeopathic hospital. I think if you go along there, it's got such a relaxing feel about it as well. And as Fiona MacLeod has said in her contribution, it has won awards. So I think it's something that, I'm not saying to put 1 to 10 or whatever on it, but it's certainly something I'd be interested in exploring, and something which I'm sure the homeopathic hospital may bring forward in the consultation also. Now, I want to touch on 3 particular areas mentioned by the Cabinet Secretary, and its integration, clinical networks and health boards. And obviously the creation of the action plans by the health boards to improve services available locally. And I think every one of us have agreed here today, it is absolutely imperative that it's not just joined up thinking we're talking about, but joined up working also. And we have to do that. All of these services have to do that to take this idea forward, and to ensure and make sure that the services that people suffering from chronic pain get are the very, very best. Now, I've heard from other members, I think practically every one of the members, regardless of party, in regards to the services by health boards. It's patchy to the extreme. Okay, in my own area, Greater Glasgow Health Board, it seems to be one of the best, but in other areas, no, they're not getting the service they deserve. And that's why I think it's very, very important. I'm sure the Cabinet Secretary and the Minister will take on board the fact that, to monitor the health boards to ensure they bring forward these plans, because if they don't work together, then I'm afraid that basically it won't work at all. Now, community pharmacies have been brought forward and mentioned on numerous occasions, and the work and the service that they deliver locally. Now, in my own area of Glasgow, Kelvin, I mean, they certainly give an invaluable service, fantastic service, well, very, very good outreach service. And I would like to ask the Minister, in his summing up, exactly what role community pharmacies will have to play in this, and if the role will be enhanced, if they will be part of the consultation process that's going out to, obviously, patients, etc. I'm sorry, Tanzara, I haven't got much time, but sorry about that. And I would just like to ask, exactly what they would, be doing there, and I'm sure the community pharmacies would like to know also. Now, the next issue I wanted to pick up on, and John McAlpine touched on this particular area, and I think it's very important, and it's not really been raised, but I think it's a very important one, and that's one of prescription charges. And, whilst this debate on the whole has been a very consensual debate, we can't ignore the Labour Party's proposal to reintroduce prescription charges. And I'd like to say to, I don't know who's going to be summing up, whether it's Jackie Bailey or Drew Smith, I think perhaps in summing up, you should actually come clean and tell the Parliament and the people here and others, Jackie, you may laugh, but some of the issues that you raise, some of the issues that people raise as well, I think it's something that people should be told about. I think Joan McAlpine raised a very, very valid point. People are suffering chronic pain. They don't need anything else to make them suffer even more. No, I think it's a very, very important point, Jackson Carlo, and I think it's about time the Labour Party came clean, and perhaps in their summing up, they will tell us exactly what they mean by prescription charges. In closing, President, I see it seemed to have touched a nerve, and I'm sorry about the pun that I may have mentioned there, but in closing, I think it's, on the whole, been a very good debate. I think congratulations has to go to the people who brought this forward to the Parliament, as I've already said before. And
must close now, please.
Thank you. I look forward to pushing forward for a chronic pain centre. Thank you very much.
Many thanks. I now call on Margaret MacDonald. Up to 3 minutes, please, after which we'll move to the closing speeches.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I hope I didn't affect your nerves there, because I just went out for a couple of co-proximal. It was not the quality of all of the speeches. They also, I think, suffered from their postcode origin. However, if I gave the impression of demeaning in any way the medical services in Scotland, particularly here in Lothian, I didn't mean to, because I have wonderful support, because I do know sometimes quite a lot of pain. But too many doctors relied on too many drugs. I was sent home from hospital once with a bag of goodies that would have kept half a housing estate happy for a month or so. And I thought that at the time there was a carelessness. All right, I was judged to be a trustworthy and sensible person, that they should know better. But I was judged that way anyway, and so therefore I was given the drugs to take home. I could have become addicted quite easily. And I realise how many other people must fall victim to that sort of addiction. But there were 2 or 3 things talked about this afternoon, and some of them I would have liked to pursue, the ones that were raised by Stuart Stevenson, because the quality of pain and the types of pain are all important. So I would ask the Minister to bear that in mind. Not all pain is the same. And it means that you will have postcode lotteries, because some folk will live nearer to a centre of excellence, and it will also perhaps be their drop-in centre. And talking of drop-in centres, can I commend to him the health flat type of arrangement that he visited with me once before, when it's local people who actually provide the services in terms of complementary services like aromatherapy and massage and so on. Now, that can be a great help to pain sufferers, because you don't just suffer pain yourself. You can quite often help a group of people suffering the same sort of symptoms. And all of these alternatives and breadth of treatments should be definitely considered, as should having to travel abroad to England if we really need to, because they're welcome to come here if they need to come, as far as I'm concerned. So the people who talked of this being a real-life experience, and Also, Stuart Stevenson, who reminded us that it can be a near-death experience. One of the most awful things is to go out of your life, I think, in pain and suffering and distress. And I'm not going to commend Bill to you just now, but you can see where there is a crossover. So can I thank you, Presiding Officer, for giving me this extra time at the end. And I'm trying to get these co-proximal, but I can't find them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well done. We now move to closing speeches, and I call on Nanette Milne at 6 minutes or thereby, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. This has been a worthwhile debate and a long overdue one, because, as verified by the cross-party group on chronic pain in its briefing and confirmed by the Cabinet Secretary, it is the first government-led debate on chronic pain in this Parliament, although there have in fact been 2 previous members' debates, the last one led by my colleague Mary Scanlon 2 years ago, as she reminded me this afternoon. Chronic pain, as we've heard, isn't uncommon, and it affects nearly 1 in 5 adults and 8% of children in Scotland. Whatever its cause, and there are many conditions which give rise to it, long-standing pain is a blight on the lives of those afflicted by it, and 1/3 of these people are never free of it. I myself have experienced the pain of an arthritic hip prior to replacement, with the other one now following suit, and believe me, it wasn't funny. But at least I and the increasing numbers of people who nowadays undergo hip replacement knew that in time my pain would be relieved. How I'd have coped 50 years ago before such surgery was available, I do not know. And I can only imagine the agonies my husband's grandmother must have gone through before the inflammatory process was spent, leaving her crippled and deformed. But there are many people affected by a wide range of conditions which give rise to chronic pain who cannot look forward to a cure, and they ought to be able to get help to cope with their pain and to access symptomatic relief wherever in Scotland they live. And sadly, that isn't yet the case. Of course, the ideal would be to prevent pain from becoming chronic, and that is often achievable with back pain, where early intervention by a physiotherapist may quickly correct acute problems and allow people to get back to a normal life. My husband was a fund-holding GP in the 1990s, and one of the first services he recruited with his budget was physiotherapy, allowing immediate referral for his patients with back pain, and so preventing chronicity from developing, usually getting them back to work quite quickly. A winner all round, with happy, pain-free patients and significant savings in sickness benefit. Sadly, that became ideologically unacceptable and fund-holding was stopped. Where pain cannot be dealt with in the 3 months before it becomes chronic, there really should be a proper pathway in place for the effective and equitable management of such a serious long-term condition. And so there must be an all-round welcome for the Government's plans to implement the well-designed Scottish service model for chronic pain to ensure the best possible outcomes for the care and support of those who live with pain. But to be fair and effective across Scotland, that model must be backed by a service delivery plan, prepared with patient input and implemented by all of the territorial health boards. And I do agree with Labour's amendment that this is urgent and that each delivery plan's implementation should be monitored, although unless I'm being somewhat naive, I'd imagine that would be the Government's intention as well. Whilst the management of patients with chronic pain has been on the radar since the mid-1990s, it is fair to say that progress really only began following the GRIPS reports of 2007 and 2008 and the appointment by Government of a lead clinician for chronic pain to coordinate and champion the development of pain management services. And now, with further funding in place to drive forward the implementation of a Scottish service model, surely we will begin to see results, including the better understanding, prevention and management of chronic pain, better services giving patients the earliest and most appropriate treatment locally, but with ready access to specialist services when needed. The availability of proper advice, support and help at community and primary care level should allow many people to manage their pain effectively themselves with appropriate medication. And for people with more complex pain, the model should ensure the ready availability of specialist pain management programmes within secondary care delivered by AHPs and pharmacists skilled and knowledgeable in pain management. I fully understand the demands for a residential centre in Scotland to cater for the needs of the small number of people with severe chronic pain who currently have to travel hundreds of miles to access the specialist services they need, because it would undoubtedly be better for patients if such care were available as near to home as possible, with friends and family reasonably close. I can still remember how isolated I felt as a relative when my son was seriously ill in Birmingham, even though I was there with him. And that sense of separation was actually all the worse for him. And that was actually without a travel ordeal, because he was totally unaware of his journey there. So I'm glad the Government is giving the possibility of an inpatient facility very serious consideration during the ongoing assessment of what is required within a Scottish intensive pain management service. A positive outcome, as called for by Jackie Bailey in her amendment, would certainly be welcomed by the patients who cannot get appropriate specialist treatment in Scotland at the present time. And if recommended by the experts considering it, then I would hope that such a residential facility would be established without delay. To conclude, Presiding Officer, this has been on the whole a very consensual and constructive debate, and a very important one for the many people in Scotland who live with chronic pain. It has taken far too long for chronic pain to be recognised as a serious long-term condition, and for the equitable development of pain management services across the whole of Scotland. But I do think the Government deserves credit for moving things forward in the last few years. I welcome the progress made so far, but there is still a long way to go to ensure the availability of good pain management provision for all the thousands of people in Scotland who suffer from long-term pain now, and for those who will have chronic pain in the future. And I hope the next debate we have will be very soon, and will be to celebrate the achievement of a first-class system for all who need it.
Many thanks. And I now call on Drew Smith, a generous 8 minutes.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. This debate has taken us maybe just a bit more than 2 hours or so this afternoon. However, for chronic pain sufferers in the gallery and our constituencies and regions who are following our proceedings, this debate about the need for proper support and treatment of chronic pain has taken, in fact, more than 11 years. But it has been a good debate, a consensual debate, and Jackson Carlaw started our debate well when he introduced a note of levity, but also still making very serious and sincere points. And Margot MacDonald, I think, in a sedentary intervention, it could probably win an award for Heckle of the Year if I'd picked it up correctly. Also said to us, that as Nanette Milne said, conditions which are absolutely not a laughing matter, but we were able to make the progress through the issue in a generous way this afternoon. But I think we should remember, for every hour and day of those years, those 11 years, Scots have suffered in pain while politicians have failed to put in place all of the services that they have asked us for. But despite that, we have approached this debate, I think, on all sides in a spirit of hope rather than recrimination. Listening to the radio on the way to Parliament this morning, it was clear that there are many people who feel they have been let down by seemingly endless debate and investigation of this issue rather than action. Reports and recommendations have come and gone, and the sun has set after a number of false dawns. Yet throughout this, there has also been voices of those who have been helped by those services which do exist, those who have benefited from a visit to Bath, or because their particular health board provides more support than another. And members across the chamber have sought to give voice to all of those people. Perhaps most memorably, Stuart Stevenson's description of his hypnotic trip, which I noticed that the Minister paid very close attention to, and I'll let him deal with some of the points that Mr Stevenson raised when he closes the debate. But I think this afternoon, these people, and I think it was Bob Doris that said this, we'll all have examples of constituents who have been to see us, or perhaps their partners or their family members who have been the people who have had to contact us because of a loved one who's not able to make that contact themselves, that they are not able to be living the life that they would choose to live, perhaps because they're lying in pain at home. In 2011, Scottish Labour included in our manifesto for elections to this Parliament our commitment to a residential treatment centre for chronic pain, and we have therefore welcomed the Cabinet Secretary's confirmation this afternoon that this will be adopted by the Scottish Government, accepting that it is sensible to examine the options and consult with those most likely to benefit from such a service as to what the best model of delivery of that centre will be. A residential centre is, in our view, a vital component of I think what John Wilson described as a comprehensive service for chronic pain sufferers, because of the respite which it offers as well as the treatment it could provide. We know that those who have had to travel a distance elsewhere in the UK have, despite the distances involved, in one case a return journey of 1,600 miles from Shetland that Jackie Bailey mentioned, benefited significantly from their experience. Up to now, the numbers able to do this have been very small, just 119 patients, and so the provision of inpatient facilities closer to home will likely increase substantially those who would wish to have access to them. And I think Graham Pearson was right to highlight the cost of sending patients to Bath which has in the past 3 years amounted to just more than £1 million. Losing much of the travel element of that expenditure would be useful if we can get a service which suits the needs of pain sufferers across Scotland, and a service which we can get right. An inpatient resource would be an important step and an important statement in not just recognising chronic pain, but resolving to actually help those affected. However, the pressures of the likely demand, as well as the best interests of patients, means that it can only ever be one component of a comprehensive package of support which must be provided. Chronic pain is associated with long-term conditions, and long-term support, which is proportionate to needs and varying needs in particular, is essential. For those who are able to continue in work, for example, services must be responsive to their lives rather than force them to give up or become isolated as a result of the pain that they suffer. As with other long-term conditions, and I think Jim Hume was quite right to say this, chronic pain can reduce our resilience as well as inhibit our daily lives. Hans-Alec Malik for Scottish Labour this afternoon also argued that the most urgent reform that is required beyond the provision of inpatient services for those most in need is that Scottish ministers do now act to end the postcode lottery of care. Services in different parts of the country should be responsive to local needs and opportunities. As a Glasgow MSP, I particularly recognise the innovation that has been possible in my health board area because of the championing of a managed clinical network by NHS at Glasgow and Clyde. But it cannot be right that when chronic pain conditions are so widespread and so debilitating to so many people, and that we know that that is in every part of Scotland, then a wide divergence exists, not just in what support is provided, but too often whether any real support is offered at all. That cannot be right. Related to this is another issue which Labour members have sought to highlight this afternoon, and which I think is topical across nearly all NHS services at the moment, and that is waiting times to get the support which might be available. Despite the good practice which exists in Glasgow, for example, last year my constituents waiting for an appointment with a pain psychologist could face waits of around 18 months. So waiting times which many of us thought were long abolished since this Parliament was created and took control of our National Health Service. At the end of last year, those figures were down, but still at more than a year. We do therefore believe that, following agreement and hopefully some consensus about what pain sufferers across the country have a right to expect, the Scottish Government will also need to make some firm commitments about what should be considered reasonable waiting periods for people for whom every hour or day of living with pain can be a mental as well as a physical trial. The current co-conveners of the cross-party group on chronic pain have been mentioned in this debate, and as have a number of activists, including Dorothy Grace-Elder, who championed this issue as a member of the Parliament, but has also kept up the pressure outside it as a journalist and campaigner, and likewise Susan Archibald, who petitioned the Parliament on this issue, and whose willingness, I think, to share her own story has ensured that attention to her case might benefit others. These individuals and many others have kept up the pressure on an issue which was never going to go away, despite a lack of action from this place for too long. Those outside Parliament who have persisted in their campaigning know that today is not the end of their wait, and that the actions that we have discussed this afternoon, and which will now be consulted upon, are not, as I think Siobhan McMahon said, not the last words on this matter. It's a cliché, Presiding Officer, to say that actions speak louder than words, but budgets demonstrate commitment much more effectively than platitudes. Also, providing the services that are required will be good value for money, but they will require resourcing. The clinical network in Glasgow has been mentioned a few times. We started only with some modest initial funding, but across Scotland 10 out of 14 health boards still have no budget for chronic pain treatment at all. It is therefore no surprise that the Scottish service model for chronic pain is being followed consistently by only 6 boards. A number of members in this debate have mentioned the various reports which have been produced. The Healthcare Improvement Scotland document of last year is perhaps the one that has caused the most consternation amongst people who followed this issue, because it was perceived to underplay real experience in favour of painting a picture in the best possible light. Such practices from official inspection bodies are, I don't think, helpful, but on this side we are pleased that the current Cabinet Secretary has decided to look beyond the official picture and attempt to see what support is really needed to make a real difference to real people's lives. Just before I close, Presiding Officer, Joe McAlpin did raise the issue of the cost of prescriptions, and there's a debate to be had about that. I don't think it was necessarily appropriate to raise it in this debate, but perhaps what I would maybe ask is that the Minister, in his closing, when he reflects on that, might say a word or two about some of the value for money issues in that, where, yes, absolutely we would want to see people who need painkillers get them, but a cost of 19 pence from High Street Pharmacist, or £3.10 that it costs the Scottish Health Service to provide that through the current arrangement. So I think there are questions in there. Scottish Labour this afternoon have reiterated our commitment to chronic pain sufferers. And the amendment in the name of Jackie Baillie seeks not to criticise or to trip up ministers, but simply to add a degree of urgency around the long understood and awaited need for an inpatient provision, which Sandra White even appeared to have a venue in mind for that, Presiding Officer. So I hope that members will support that urgency and also the need to have consistent services across the country.
Thank you very much. And I now call on Minister Michael Matheson to wind up the debate. 10 minutes, please. You have until 4:59, Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I think this has been a debate which has drawn a considerable degree of consensus across the Chamber and all parties on our shared desire to achieve a better way in which services are provided for those patients who suffer from chronic pain for whatever reason as to how that may manifest itself. And it's also an issue which a number of speakers have recognised has a long history in terms of campaigns both within this Parliament and out with the Parliament in seeking to see improvements taking place, with the first debate, as members have referred to, led by Dorothy Gay-Selder back in February 2002, and Mary Scanlon's debate in March 2011, and to the debate which the Government is leading here today. So it's an issue which has drawn a considerable level of parliamentary interest over a period of time, if not necessarily in terms of absorbing debate time in the Chamber itself, but at the cross-party group and activities, there have been a significant number of MSPs who have been involved and interested in this particular issue. I also recognise that for those campaigners who have been involved in pressing for improvements to services, that despite some of the improvements that have been made since 2007, that there is a degree of frustration, a desire for things to move on apace, and for that pace to be stepped up. And I believe today's debate demonstrates the Government's response to that in pushing forward with further improvements in this area. And the debate has been very much, I believe, about looking forward and how we can continue to improve on the progress that has been made and to build on that, rather than looking back too much on what happened in the past and which report said what and where it was published then or whatever, about how we can move forward and improve services overall. I thought in Jackson Carlos, I'll give way to Mary Scanlon.
Mary Scanlon.
Having party group on chronic pain for 8 years, a promise I made to Dorothy Gray-Selder and wouldn't have dared not to do. Can I just ask, given that there's currently no clear referral policy for chronic pain, how will the Government identify those patients who would benefit from more specialised or residential treatment before moving forward to the new model of delivery?
We'll try and address that when I move to some of the issues around the signed guidelines, etc., which are going to be developed, which I think will help to address the very point the member's making reference to. I thought, though, in Jackson Carlos' contribution, I thought he made an excellent contribution around the difficulty in defining chronic pain in itself. You can take the very sterile approach that is defined within the clinical world in itself, but like him, I think I very much view that the real definition here is about the human effect of chronic pain on the individual. That's the definition by which you have to measure what you have to do in order to try and help to support and address that individual's needs. And that goes beyond just the physical limitations that it creates, whether you're able to tie your shoelaces, whether you're able to get out your bed yourself, whether you're able to comb your hair yourself, the small practical things that someone suffering from chronic pain can find that they are just no longer able to do, but it's also the impact that it can have on them psychologically and the draining effect it can have on them psychologically in losing the ability to do to undertake these functions themselves, and how that can demoralise them and have a negative impact on their mental well-being. And also the social impact that then has on an individual in the potential effect of losing self-confidence and a desire to withdraw from things because of concerns that you're not able to be as independent as you would like to be, and the consequent effect that that can have on an individual. And I recognise that the medical model that I thought was very ably illustrated by Margaret MacDonald in her bag of goodies approach that very often can be taken in this particular issue, I think that it has to be recognised that the social model has got a very important part to play in supporting individuals with chronic pain. And I think Susan Archibald, in raising that within her petition, has made a very valid point, but it's more about trying to enable and helping to support and intervene where necessary, rather than actually simply looking for a straightforward medical solution. I think when John Wilson made in his contribution his comments around the holistic approach, and as Bob Doris also made reference to in the work that's done by MS Revive and Mary Hill, the type of approach that's used there, that holistic approach looking at the whole person, the medical aspects, the physical aspects, the social aspects as well, and how you can best address these issues in order to try and help to support that individual most effectively. But alongside that, I think it's also important that we have the clinical standards which can allow us to underpin some of the progress that's necessary in this area. Margaret MacDonald raised the issue about where there are clinical standards, and Mary Scanlon, her intervention, raised that particular issue. And the sign guidelines, or draft sign guidelines, a range of areas covered in December last year, which go from assessment and planning of care, support self-management, pharmacological therapies, right through to dietary therapies and also complementary therapies and physical therapies. What I believe will offer a holistic package of standards which can help to support improvements and developments in this particular area, and those sign guidelines are due to be finalised by December of this year. So that will provide us with a further building block to help to make further progress in moving forward over the overall clinical standards. A number of members in their contribution have made reference to the Scottish Service Model for chronic pain, and the Cabinet Secretary in his opening remarks highlighted the tier-based approach that's been developed within that service model, the three different tiers. The reality is that for the vast majority of individuals who suffer from chronic pain, that their service delivery from the model of the service model will be from tiers 1 and 2. It will be self-management, and it will be within the primary care setting, very often through a general practitioner, but where necessary being referred on to a tier 3 level intervention, which may be much more specialised within the acute setting. But what's important to recognise is that what I think is extremely important here, that to make this service model work effectively, we need to make sure that we have the right clinical skills and understanding within the primary care setting around how we support individuals with chronic pain. And that's why I think, for example, the approach that's been taken in Dumfries and Galloway, with 20 of their physiotherapists being trained in cognitive behavioural therapy, can help to support that type of approach. And the approach that's also been taken by NHS Lanarkshire, with the training they're providing to GPs, and I understand are now looking to recruit a GP clinical lead on chronic pain in order to continue to drive forward improvements in the primary care setting. And it's the GPs and other clinicians based within the primary care setting working in partnership with the community pharmacists that Sandra White made reference to.
Give me too many private conversations. A little bit of respect for the Minister, please.
That made reference to will be extremely important. The community pharmacists working in partnership with the community physicians such as our GPs to make sure they're providing the best type of medical intervention, pharmacological input as and when necessary to help to support that particular patient. I'll give way to a member.
Hansala Malik.
I have a difficulty locally where a private person wishes to open a chemist, and some of the bigger boys, particularly Boots chemists, to sit on their board won't allow them, and they continue to refuse them. Can there something be done to allow small individuals, independent chemists, to actually open up without the harassment of some of the bigger players in the field?
Minister?
Well, there is a formalised application process for looking for a licence for a pharmacy, but if the member wants to write to me with the details of it, I can respond to that in more detail for him. Can I turn now finally to the issue of the residential service? Can I say that what members should be in no doubt is the consultation that we intend to publish later this year is not a consultation on whether we should have some type of residential specialist facility in Scotland or not. It's about the model that should actually be. So there will be a facility provided in Scotland. What I think is important, given the history in this debate around those patients who feel that they have been listened to, that there hasn't been enough action taken in order to address their concerns, that we take the right time to consult them on what their views are on the model that should actually be provided for in Scotland. And I think if we take the time to do that, we can make sure that we get the best potential outcome for patients in Scotland. So as a government, we are very much committed to making sure that we provide the facility in an appropriate way in Scotland. Whether it be the 3 different options or a combination of the 3 options, as Jackson Callow has indicated, it may be 4 or 5 different options are consulted upon. But what I think is extremely important is we take the necessary time to consult with the patients who have the biggest interest in this issue to get the right model. And regretfully, it's on that basis that we're not able to accept the amendment that's been proposed by the Labour Party here this afternoon. But I would urge members to unite in supporting the motion in the Cabinet Secretary's name at 5 o'clock this evening.
And it's now time to move on to the next item of business, which is consideration of business motion S4M 06758 in the name of Joe Fitzpatrick on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau setting out a programme of business. And I would ask any member who wishes to speak against the motion to press the request to speak button now. And I call on Joe Fitzpatrick to move motion number S4M 06758.
Formally moved.
Thank you. As no member has asked to speak against the motion, I will now put the question to the Chamber. And the question is that motion number S4M 06758 in the name of Joe Fitzpatrick be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are. The next item of business is consideration of business motion S4M 06759 in the name of Joe Fitzpatrick on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau setting out the Stage 1 timetable for the Crofting Amendment Scotland Bill. I would ask any member who wishes to speak against this motion to press the request button to speak now. And I call on Minister Joe Fitzpatrick to move motion S4M 06759. Thank you, Minister. And as no member has asked to speak against the motion, I will now put the question to the Chamber. And the question is that motion number S4M 06759 in the name of Joe Fitzpatrick be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are. The next item of business is consideration of a Parliamentary Bureau motion on the establishment of the City of Edinburgh Council Portobello Park Bill Committee. And I would ask Joe Fitzpatrick to move motion S4M 06760. Minister?
Formally moved.
Thank you. And the question on this motion, which will be put at decision time, to which we now come. And there are 3 questions to be put as a result of today's business. And the first question is that amendment number S4M 06746.1 in the name of Jackie Bailey, which seeks to amend motion number S4M 06746 in the name of Alex Neil on ensuring access to high-quality sustainable services for people living with chronic pain be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. We are not agreed. Therefore, we will move to a vote, and members should cast their votes now, please. And the result of the vote on amendment number 6746.1 in the name of Jackie Bailey is yes 40, no 70, and there was 1 abstention, and the amendment is therefore not agreed. The second question now is that motion number S4M 06746 in the name of Alec Neil on ensuring access to high-quality sustainable services for people living with chronic pain be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The motion is therefore agreed to. The third question is, the third and final question is that motion number S4M 06760 in the name of Joe Fitzpatrick on the establishment of the City of Edinburgh Council Portobello Park Bill Committee be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are. And that concludes decision time, and we will now move on to the next to members' business. And I'd ask members who are leaving the chamber to do so quickly and quietly, please.